Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting of August 2nd. And at this time, I would like to call to order the August 2nd meeting of the Los Banos City Council. And could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Chief, would you lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start tonight's meeting, I would like to take a moment to update the community on the status of the two officers who were shot on Monday morning. The good news is both are in stable condition and improving every day. Both are communicating with their families and friends, and they are in good spirits. But the two will likely face weeks and months, if not months, of medical care and rehabilitation. On behalf of myself and my fellow council members, I would like to thank the officers and their families for their selfless dedication in serving the community of Los Banos. You will continue to be in our thoughts and prayers, and please recover as quickly as possible. We will not be commenting on any facts of the case. Right now, our focus is to get our men back and healthy. And again, I am just so proud of all the first responders, everyone who assisted in this situation, and what a family you are. Thank you for your service. Roll call. Director Maloney.
Maria. Johnson Santos. Lewis. Here. Silvera.
Present.
Villalta.
Here, and we have a quorum. Consideration of approval of agenda. Do I have a motion? Mr. Silvera.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda and remove item number 9, open counter presentation and demonstration, to a later date.
Thank you. And the reason for the removal is he's stuck in traffic. Do I have a second? Mrs. Lewis.
Second.
Motion by Silvera, second by Lewis, with the removal of item 9. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? None. Carried. Let's go on to presentation. Proclamation recognizing August 13th to the 19th, 2017 as National Health Center Week. Do we have a representative here for that? Could you please come forward? Good evening. Your name is?
My name is Lou Tao.
Lou Tao?
Yes.
Thank you, Lou, for coming this evening to receive this proclamation. Proclamation recognizing August 13th to the 19th, 2017 as National Health Center Week. Whereas for 50 years, community health centers have provided high-quality, affordable, comprehensive, primary, and preventative health care in our nation's underserved communities, delivering value to and having a significant impact on America's health care system. As the county's largest primary care network, health centers now serve the health care home for over 25 million Americans and over 10,000 delivery sites across the nation. Health centers are locally controlled by patient majority boards, which ensures patients are engaged in their own health care decisions. In our local community health center, Golden Valley Health Centers provide critical medical, dental, behavioral health, pharmacy, and specialty services to 150,000 throughout the Merced and Stanislaus counties. Golden Valley Health Centers is a locally owned and operated nonprofit organization that serves as a critical economic engine, helping to power the local economy by generating millions of dollars in combined economic impact in some of the region's economically deprived communities. Golden Valley Health Centers continue to prove an effective means of overcoming barriers to healthcare access, including geography, language, income, insurance, and insurance status. Doing so improves the healthcare outcomes and reduces healthcare system costs. Golden Valley Health Center reduces overall costs of care by managing chronic conditions and keeping patients out of the costlier healthcare settings like hospitals and emergency rooms. National Health Center Week offers the opportunity to recognize America's Health Center, their dedicated staff, board members, and all responsible for their continued success. During the National Health Center Week, we celebrate the 45th anniversary of Golden Valley Health Centers and the vital role they play in the well-being of our community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the mayor and the city council members of the city of Los Banos do by proclaim August 13th to the 19th, 2017 as National Health Center Week, and encourage all to celebrate the most important partnership between America's health centers and the patients they serve by visiting Golden Valley Health Centers. And if you do have an open house again, please be sure to invite us.
Sure. Can I have a few words?
You can have as many words as you'd like.
So I'd like to address the chambers and the residents of Los Banos. We have Golden Valley Health Centers. Would like to thank the city for allowing us to open 2 clinics 41 years ago, the medical clinic across from the hospital, and about 10 years ago, the dental clinic on I Street. Last year alone, we served 5,600 residents of Los Banos in both of the clinics, and we saw over 17,000 visits in the 2 clinics. We are the safety net clinic that see the uninsured patient who have no no coverage, as well as Medi-Cal and commercial covered insurance patient as well. And we are proud to be part of the community. We are here to serve the patient and the resident in the area. With your help, we will continue to serve the uninsured and underinsured population in the community. And 2 of the clinics here are part of the 29 clinic system in the 2 counties, Merced County and Stanislaus County. And we will be opening up another clinic in Manteca in a few months too. So thank you for the proclamation, and thank you for being part of this tonight's meeting.
Thank you, sir. Oh, sure. Okay, we're good. Thank you. Let's go on to item 6, public forum. Members of the public may address the city council members on any item of interest that is within the jurisdiction of the city council, which includes agenda and non-agenda items. No action will be taken on non-agenda items. Speakers are limited to a 5-minute presentation, and detailed guidelines are posted on the council chamber informational table. Please, when you approach the podium, please state your name and city of residence. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public forum? Please come forward.
My name is Marlene C. Miller Alves. I would like to address the council members, mayor, and our fellow residents in the city of Los Banos. Last time we were here, we were discussing about us following the footsteps of Clovis for the sign ordinances to possibly view that. I have received the sign ordinances of Clovis. They are much stricter than what we have right now. Also, I have a sister from the Clovis area that has a sign business for over 35 years. There's extreme amount of problems with the sign issues and different things with the businesses. And I would like for her to be invited down once we start doing the ordinances in the future, so we'll get a firsthand information and view on that. Then also, I even went as far as contacting the city of Clovis on the water issues. On the city of Clovis, the cost of the water is $30 every 2 weeks. If you pull 25,000 gallons, there's a cost of 89 cents for every $1,000 extra used. I don't know if we can put our foot in that door at this cost, but I really do feel we should only be billed for what we use rather than the $89 plus, no matter what you use. My father was in a nursing home for 1.5 years. His house was vacant, and we had to pay $89 a month. So I think this is another issue we need to step into and look at as well as the city ordinances. Thank you, and good night.
No. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at the public forum?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm Rhonda Lowe, City of Los Banos. When I was here at the last City Council, I told you about the farm to table dinner that was coming up September 21st. Just to update on that, we have roughly 32 tickets left out of the 150 tickets. So we are expecting a heck of a night. It's something better than we had even hoped for. The one thing I wanted to tell you about tonight that we've added new this year is the Farm Family of the Year Award, which seems like such a natural to tie in with the Farm to Table Dinner. And we are accepting applications for local farmers and their families who really signify and exemplify what agriculture is and how important it is to our area. We have those applications are available at some downtown businesses, or you can email me at lbpub@earthlink.net or text me at 209-704-4384. I'm on Facebook, so I'm easy to find there as well. Deadline for entries is August 31st, and I'm sure all of you know, if you're not a farmer yourself, you know of somebody in this community that really does exemplify what we're trying to bring honor to. So we would love for you to submit entries if you're the farmer or if you know of a farmer. And I brought some flyers that I will leave with Lucy about that. The last thing I wanted to bring up is, as a representative of Valley Sierra Small Business Development Center, which is a really long name, I wanted to let you know that they've made a real commitment to helping local people either start a business or improve their business. And they do that through people like me who are business coaches and go in and work one-on-one with people that are looking to start a business or already have an existing business. And it's people that have already been in business, so they kind of know the steps to take, and they know how to get you connected with the people that can help you. We're going to do 2 events. One is going to be August 24th, and it's going to be from 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And it's kind of a drop-in where you can come in and talk to one of us, ask questions, find out what the Small Business Development Center is all about. All of the services are free to the people that use us, and so that's a really big benefit. You're not paying for all of those things. It'll be held at 9. Sorry, didn't put my glasses on.
Don't mind?
You could probably hold this up and I could read it over there. 919 6th Street. And we'll be talking about our services. We do startup services if you want to learn how to write a business plan, if you want marketing help, those kinds of things that any businesses have to deal with. And really to help you, if you're thinking about starting a business, the pitfalls and trying to help you avoid the pitfalls.
Would you send us an email, please? Send the city manager and send the council members an email? Or send it to the city manager and he can send it to us, either way.
And I will leave those. And then the last one will be one I'm going to do on September 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. And we're going to do that at Cecilia's Restaurants. And that's really more like a small business mini boot camp where we're going to touch on the things that are important but have more in depth on that. And that'll be from 6 to 8 p.m. at Cecilia's Restaurant. And so thank you. We want to do our part to make Los Banos a viable business community and to help everybody succeed.
So when is the farm to table? What day? September what?
September 21st.
September 21st.
And I would encourage anybody that's thinking about it to not wait to buy a ticket. $150, okay.
Okay.
$150 is our maximum. We talked about going over, but we've already made commitments that kind of keep us at $150. Next year, I'm sure we're going to increase it. So those are for you, Lucy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you hand those to Lucy for me, please?
I will.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to public forum? Not seeing or hearing anyone, I will now close the public forum, bring it back to council level, and let's go on to consideration of approval of consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine. We voted on in one motion, unless removed by the consent removed from the consent agenda by a city council member. And tonight we have Director Melanie.
Items on the consent agenda are as follows. Warrant numbers 205817 through 206057 in the amount of $2,455,221.51. Minutes for the July 19th, 2017 City Council meeting. City Council Resolution number 5878, accepting 3 grant deeds for right-of-way dedication associated with street sidewalk corner improvements as part of the K Street storm drain improvements. City Council Resolution number 5879, authorizing award of construction contract for Olivera Park renovations to Ronnie's Inc. in the amount of $312,284.03. City Council Resolution number 5880, awarding the bid and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for the construction of approximately 350 square foot addition to the east side of City Hall that will expand office space for the Finance and Human Resources Departments with Arts Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $199,500 and adopting a revised budget for the 2017-2018 fiscal year as it pertains to expenditures in the amount of $19,950 for a 10% contingency for unexpended expenses. City Council Resolution number 5881, authorizing the city manager to execute the Measure V Master Recipient Funding Agreement between Merced County Association of Governments and the City of Los Banos. City Council Resolution number 5882, authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Management Partners Incorporated to conduct an organizational assessment study not to exceed $49,900. And the items are to be approved as submitted.
Hey, is there anyone who would like to remove an item for discussion? Ms. Lewis.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request to pull item F.
Okay.
And with that, pulling item F, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted, minus item F.
Okay. Do I have a second? Ms. Silvera?
Second.
Motion by Lewis, second by Silvera to approve A, B, C, D, E, and G, minus item F that has been pulled for a separate vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? None. Carried. Mrs. Lewis.
Yes, The question I have on this is in the summary of the agenda item on page 1 at the bottom, it states that MCAG is to allocate the funds resulting from Measure V in accordance with voter approval. And I guess what I want to know with the plan that's been submitted to us, has there been any additional language added to it over and above what the voters have approved?
Mr. Vaughn, do you want to answer, or Mr. Ellis?
I'll take a crack at that.
Okay.
And others chime in if you need to. So the agreement really is just implementing the expenditure plan. So the expenditure plan that was approved by the voters trumps the agreement. So again, just implementing the expenditure plan, and those funds will be distributed and allocated according to the expenditure plan.
Okay, and this expenditure plan is what the voters approved?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's nothing additional in this over and above what the voters have approved?
Well, again, the agreement implements the expenditure plan. So funds will be allocated according to the expenditure plan, and there's...
Right, I heard that.
Right.
What I'm not hearing is the expenditure plan, and maybe Mr. Vaughn can address this, I would assume was addressed as part of the voters' package. Is there anything different in what you've reviewed over time that may have changed?
No, it doesn't change the expenditure plan, doesn't change the allocation of the funds. It simply is a nuts and bolts regulatory agreement as to how and when the funds are going to be dispersed that is not covered in the expenditure plan, and the obligations of MCAG to do that in a timely fashion, to provide audits, all those types of nuts and bolts things that you would see in a typical subrecipient agreement when you have a third party administering a pot of money. So it does not change the allocations, doesn't change how the money's spent. It just simply is an agreement between MCAG and the recipient of the money in terms of how that's going to all happen. Does that make sense? So MCAG is the neutral party who is administering the money, and the agreement just simply states how that money is going to be administered and forwarded to the cities. That's all the agreement does. It doesn't change anything in terms of the expenditure plan. Matter of fact, I think a lot of that agreement takes language directly out of the expenditure plan and puts it into the agreement.
Okay. Yeah, this is a very complicated process for Measure V, and I guess I just want to make sure that there's no hidden agenda for the city of Los Banos or any other city for that fact, but I'm concerned about Los Banos.
No, I think again, the purpose of the agreement is just to give MCAG the nuts and bolts of how they're going to, when they're going to send out the money, how they're going to do it, how they're going to account for it, the formula they're going to use. It doesn't change anything that the voters approved in the adoption of Measure V.
Okay. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions before I move forward.
I asked Mr. Vaughn to review the total agreement, and so what he did is he had his own version of it. He sent that to MCAG, and MCAG incorporated a lot of Mr. Vaughn's language in the agreement. So he reviewed this word for word. And at the end, you're going to see in the next to the last paragraph, you're going to see this is a one-year agreement. It is less than 1 year now. And that means that has to come back. And if I believe from memory, it says MCAG and the recipients have to ratify this agreement. So this will come back to us.
Yeah, this is just really a typical implementing agreement, implementing the measure. There's nothing that changes anything that the voters did. The measure doesn't go into the detail as to how that money, what time of the month it gets sent to the recipients. The measure doesn't get into the detail that the person or the organization administering the money needs to have to effectively administer the money. So these are just simply setting forth the ground rules for MCAG to administer the money as it comes in. And verifying that the cities and the recipients are going to spend it consistent with what Measure V says. So, and in fact, we did make significant comments to the first draft of this, which MCAG accepted 95% of those comments.
I have one other question on the summary agreement. The second to the last bullet point on page 2, could you maybe clarify that a little bit more for me, please?
You mean on the staff report?
Yes, on the staff report.
I didn't author the staff report, but I'd be happy to look at it.
It says requires recipient to use all local project funds solely for transportation purposes as defined by the expenditure plan.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just is confirming that the recipient is going to spend the money in accordance with what Measure V says they're to spend the money on. When it says you're to spend it on transportation, you don't spend it on building a new city hall, for instance.
So it doesn't matter if, I guess, in the agreement, some of it can be used for maybe fixing pipes or something under streets. I don't recall all the details of that, but I'm assuming that.
It's all it's saying is you're going to spend it the way Measure V says you're to spend it. So it doesn't redefine that expenditure. That's all that paragraph is saying.
Okay, Alex, did you want to say something?
Just to echoing what the city attorney says, it just states that local entities will be required to spend those funds according to the expenditure plan for transportation purposes.
It says transportation.
For transportation purposes, correct.
Okay. I guess that's a broad statement, transportation. Okay. All right, those are my questions.
And remember, there are separate pots of money that we have to deal with. There's the local funds that in the amount of $767,000, 20% of that has to go towards green pathways. And then the remainder of it is the discretion of transportation within the city of Los Banos. That's our money. Then there is another large pot of money, which is the regional funds. The regional funds then is recommendations are made by a 5-member board, the 3 mayors and 2 supervisors. On the west side, on the east side, there's an 8-panel, which includes all the supervisors because they represent everyone, all the 5 supervisors represent some portion of someone on the east side. So, and then the 3 cities. So there's 8 over there. We're lucky we have 5. So that's that pot of money, and then we're going to be meeting with that. But I think part of the enticement here too is this is less than a 1-year agreement, and this has to come back. So if there are questions that come up within the time span of this agreement, then we need to address those for the future agreement. Mr. Silvera? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, did you have any questions?
No, I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Silvera?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for the city attorney. What happens if we vote no, if we don't approve it?
We don't get the money.
Okay, I just wanted to make clear of that. And I do like the fact that we put a 1-year time limit on it, just so that gives us opportunity to live with it for a year. And if there's things that we see that come up that need to be changed, we have an opportunity to change that. However, that being said, if we get to a point that we feel comfortable with the payment system, does this have to be revisited, a new term have to be revisited every year, or could you do, a multi-year, 2-3 year?
Once it hits its stride, you can go longer than a year. Because if you notice, those bullet points aren't all things that are actually in the Measure V. So they're just fine-tuning how MCAG is going to administer this money. They have to have a quarterly report. Again, it's just the implementation document to the overall expenditure plan, which is in essence the Bible. And then from there, you have a document that says, okay, how are we going to implement this Measure V? And that's what this subrecipient agreement says. And it doesn't change Measure V. in terms of any of the things that Measure V says.
Very good. Well, if there aren't any further questions, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve City Council Resolution number 5881, authorizing the city manager to execute the Measure V Master Recipient Funding Agreement between Merced County Association of Governments and the City of Los Banos.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Silveira, second by Lewis to approve item F, resolution, City Council Resolution 5881. And I would encourage council members to again, view this over the next 10 months or so to make sure that the language that comes up in the future after the 1 year is the language that we want to live with. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? None carried. Okay, let's go on to item 8, public hearing. If you challenge a proposed action described herein in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described herein in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Item 8A, public hearing, to receive public comment and consideration of an amendment of annexation number 10 to the City of Los Banos Community Facilities District, CFD, number 2002-01 Public Safety Services relative to the Overland Court Senior Affordable Housing Complex located at the northwest corner of Overland Avenue and Rockport Drive. Okay, and let's go Community and Economic Development Director Elms.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. So just a brief background on CFDs and what they are. So CFD stands for Community Facilities District. This is enacted by the Mello-Roos Act, which authorizes local governments to create a community facilities district for the financing of public services and facilities. And we, the City of Los Banos, utilize community facility districts for the purpose of financing public safety services. This particular boundary was brought to you on June 7th, and the City Council on June 7th adopted a resolution of intention to annex that boundary into Community Facilities District 2002-01. This is the boundary of that property. It's approximately 4.78 acres at the northwest corner of Overland Avenue and Rockport Drive. That project is the Overland Court Senior Housing Project. The fiscal impact would consist of 60 residential units. And at the current Community Facilities District rate, that's at $350.64, which would amount to generating approximately over $24,000 for public safety services annually. The maximum annual special tax rate will be escalated no more than 4% annually and will be determined by the Consumer Price Index. So that'll be increasing as the Consumer Price Index increases. So the public hearing, we're asking to hold a public hearing tonight, and any person residing within the boundaries of annexation number 10, and that is a property owner, may appear and be heard on any matter relating to the establishment and extent of Community Facilities District number 10. So with that, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt a resolution calling a special election for the qualified electors of annexation number 10, which would be the landowner, and each landowner has 1 vote per acre or portion thereof. That's why there's 5 votes allocated to this particular boundary, because it's over 4 acres. And then adopt a resolution declaring the results of the special election. And that concludes my report. I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is open the public hearing now, if that's all right. And it says, I will now formally open the public hearing regarding a proposed annexation of territory to Community Facilities District number 2002-01, Public Safety Services, and levy of a special tax therein. Will anyone who wishes to speak in favor of or in opposition to these matters please come forward now? Not seeing or hearing anyone, I will now close the public comment section. Is there any discussion or are there any questions from the members of the council? Hearing, I'm sorry.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Stacy, when this project came to us before, I don't recall that there was a proposal for voting this into the Community Facilities District. Could you explain to me why it's changed for this time?
Each Community Facilities District has to go through this process. We are just following the law and the Mello-Roos Act and that process. So as you recall, a couple of months ago, we did the Harvest Grove Community Facilities District. It requires a two-step process. There's a resolution of intent, and then within 30 to 60 days, we as a city are then required to do an election and to then certify those results. And so we're following that same exact process now. It's the Community Facilities District process.
So then the first hearing on this particular matter, if it hadn't been continued, this would have been the second step to it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so back on June 7th, that was not a public hearing. It was a consent item, but that was the council giving staff the direction to create the boundary of, so that's creating the map and the boundary. Then, according to the law, according to the Mello-Roos Act, we are required within a certain period of time to record that map, that boundary map, prior to this public hearing. So we're just following the steps of the law. And then the final process is the election. Because this is a voluntary process, we cannot force the property owner to enter into a Mello-Roos. However, it is a condition of approval, and they were not going to be given final occupancy until they did so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Council, are there any other questions this time? Okay. Has the city clerk received written protests to any of the matters addressed in the public hearing for any registered voters or landowners of more than 50% of the acreage located within annexation number 10 of the Community Facilities District number 2002-01? Director Maloney?
I have received no written protests.
Thank you. If there are no further comments from the public or the members of the council, I will now close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. I will now entertain a motion to approve resolution number 5848, calling on an election regarding the annexation of certain land to Community Facilities District 2002-01 of the City of Los Banos. And do I have a motion? To approve City Council Resolution 5883.
It's 584, right?
Oh, sorry. Or 584. 5884, is that correct? I have this. 5883.
Oh, that's not what the script says.
Oh, okay. Hey. That's why I looked at the agenda. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve City Council Resolution 5883? Mr. Silvera.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve City Council Resolution number 5883 as previously stated.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion by Silvera, second by Lewis to approve City Council Resolution number 5883. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? None carried. Now, we'd like to take a short 5-minute recess for City Clerk to hold the election. All right. All right. City Clerk?
I have received 5 yes votes and 0 no votes.
All right. I will now entertain a motion to approve resolution number 5884, declaring the results of the election. City Council Resolution number 5884, acting in its capacity as a legislative body to CFD number 2002-01 of the City of Los Banos Public Safety Services, declaring the results of the special tax election and annexing certain territory, annexation number 10. Do I have a motion, Mr. Silvera?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve City Council Resolution number 5884 as read by title.
Mrs. Lewis?
Second.
Motion by Silvera, second by Lewis to approve City Council Resolution number 5884 as read by title. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? None. Carried. Okay. Item 9 has been removed. Item 10, I see Mr. Waddell someplace. Where'd he go? There he is. Los Banos Airport Site Selection and Concept Study Report. Update and to receive City Council direction on the next steps in the process. And we're going to go to Public Works Director, Mr. Fachin, for an intro.
Good evening, council members. Tonight we're going to have you receive a presentation update on the airport site selection and concept study by our consultant, Mr. Bob Waddell of Waddell Engineering. And after that presentation, staff has a brief report outlining possible next steps in this process. And we're seeking council direction to implement the 3 items recommended for this process to continue. So without further ado, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Good evening. It's nice to be back in Los Banos. In particular, since there was an accident at 152 and I-5 where a truck dumped a whole bunch of wheels on the ground, like rims for cars. So that shut down the 152 quite nicely for a half hour.
Your car doesn't have a new set, does it?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
So I must say I'm glad to be here.
Okay.
And we've enjoyed working on your study. We've in fact enjoyed working on your airport for a long time. The study started, I guess, with you a little over a year ago, and we found at the outset that we would be looking at additional sites subsequent to our last study in around 2005. And so we'll see if this works going that way. I should let Mark operate this. It's what? Okay, why don't you just go ahead and move it. And so the city had us undertake an update to our previous study that looked at sites to the north, a little bit west, east, and south. And in this updated study, we looked at a revised study area, which is shown in green. And during that study, we found some possible sites. If you do the next slide. Some of the possible sites were the Fox Hills, the Interstate 5 South, as we call it, Central South, and Central East. In our analysis, we found that any one of those sites had merit and would likely be a reasonable candidate for a new site in the event the city wants to relocate the airport. We had a meeting with you on this. We focused on the Interstate 5 South site. And as part of that, we expressed a concern that the FAA, to even consider a new site, would want to know that it has a good chance of working relative to wind. And so the city actually took a wise step and purchased wind recording equipment, placed it on this site, and started collecting wind around February a year ago. We now have about a year and 4 months worth of wind data. We don't expect you to read this table, but the table is collecting wind constantly throughout the day, 360-degree directions, and all of the various speeds. And that wind has been accumulated by my staff to the next slide, where we have a windrows, which you also can't read. This is part of your eye test, though. And but the interesting thing about the windrows is one of the issues with your existing site is that at one time it did have 2 runways, and the wind kind of comes down the split of the 2 of them, which is pretty good. They were pretty wise in the 1940s. And this site, I can't say much to my surprise because I've been flying here to Los Banos since the early 70s, and I've been flying throughout the whole area. And this is what I actually expected the wind to be doing, pretty much coming down this site. And in fact, it has, for the year and a third that we've recorded and analyzed, it has 97% wind coverage, meaning that it does not have a crosswind that would be unacceptable any more than almost 3% of the time. The FAA considers having crosswind runways when you don't accomplish 95% wind. So you actually have accomplished it. So now the only surprise is that I was right before I knew I was right. So I'm pleased with that result. But that did allow us to have some reasonable faith in moving forward with the layout of the site. So we'll look at the next slide. This shows the orientation of the site as we discussed before, where the airport facilities are sort of in a blue. We have some trapezoids at each end, left and right, which are runway protection zones. We have the canal. We have I-5 going across the bottom, left to right. And we've identified possible land acquisition for the site. And we're not so specific that it must be exactly this land, but this is a reasonable shape of land acquisition. And it does fall in less than 300 acres, which is the limit for which the city may annex. And the specific pieces that would be annexed if you move forward would be whatever shapes the city deems appropriate, because the city certainly can own land outside of the city limits, just as I might or anybody else. But the land that you annex would be specific to what your needs are and what your interests are and what is required. But therefore, with this layout, we are able to purchase sufficient land for the airport. A small portion to the right that is in yellow and crosshatched would be easement, because that land we don't need to occupy with any facilities. And so that could be purchase of an easement or later acquisition. Next slide. So we then went through and did a more specific layout of the facilities. And I think the useful thing to see is how might the airport be developed in stages. And so we have a sort of a tan color, which is the first stage, let's say 0 to 5 years of development, followed by the blue color, and then later the purple, and then finally ultimate or beyond the planning period is green. So with this layout, we are developing, the concept really is to, in essence, replace the existing airport. But if we were going into FAA now and saying, we'd like to replace the airport, first thing they'd say is why. We think you have a good airport, and I agree, you do have a good airport. Your airport is certainly safe and compatible, and sure, it could have some improved compatibility. It is to the west edge of town. There is development around it, but it is compatible. So FAA would say, well, why do you want to replace it? And I think that kind of gets back to, well, if your city looked like this now, is this where you would put the airport? And the answer is no, not really, because there are better places. So if you had a clean sheet of paper now, the airport would be somewhere like these sites, the 4 possible sites to the south. And so then FAA would say, well, if you want to replace your airport, we have different requirements now than when your airport was built in the 40s, when FAA didn't even exist, or during your recent 20 and 30 years at the airport. And so we have different standards. And in fact, some things that you have now, we would not typically fund initially. We would wait until we think that there's a capacity need. For example, the runway right now is 75 feet wide. And for the aircraft that typically use the airport, the minimum would be 60 feet wide. So if we were talking FAA into building a new airport here or another city in California, they'd want to know the justification of why it should be wider than 60 feet. And we have good justification, and that is for wind. But actually, we have wind data on this site, and the wind is actually good. And so we don't have a need to go wider than 60 feet here. They also would say that full-length parallel taxiways are not required at airports that have this level of activity. And we'd say, well, we'd like to develop into a full parallel taxiway system. We recognize there's not a lot of traffic, but therefore we'll get started with turnarounds on each end. And that's the brown sort of teacup handles, both ends of the runway. So the first phase would be to develop a 60-foot wide runway, 3,800 feet long. We would have the turnarounds on both ends. The FAA would say, well, now wait a minute, the aircraft have to clear the operational areas. And we say, yes, we understand that. And that's why we have those two bump outs there to the upside of the teacups. And that is as a holding apron and turnaround for aircraft. And they'd say, okay, that's good. Then we'd have initial apron. We would also have new T hangars, 24. Right now you have 19 aircraft in T hangars, but we would have 24. We could relocate the hangar that we did for you in 1999, the 8-unit more recent one, that could be unbolted and moved down to the site. Or you could have 3 new ones, whatever the city deems appropriate. And we'd have the fuel farm, which we can move from the existing site. And so,
Can I ask you, what's the length of our runway right now?
3,800 feet.
This would be the same size?
It would be the same. And,
Okay.
and that could be deemed a little bit longer than you would need, but you also get occasional, or you have had the Ameriflight small cargo airplanes. You do get business jets occasionally, so 3,800 feet is a good length to have. And I think the fact that you've had that for quite a while, we can justify that with FAA.
Okay.
And so we would move one T hangar building if you wish. We'd move the fuel farm, which also we did in 1999. And you'd have an access road coming in. South Creek Road is not paved that far, so we have about 500 feet of paving that we would anticipate the city would be the one doing it, since the city's creating the project. And the runway system would have full lighting. It would have the visual approach slope indicator showing the descent to the runway for pilots on final. It would have runway end identifier lights, the flashing strobe showing where the end of the runway is. And it would also have an AWOS system, the all-weather observation system that you currently have. However, it would be a new one since yours has aged and has maintenance problems. So that would be the first stage of development. The second stage would be to work our way into the parallel taxiway system. So that would be the blue portion with a connection to the apron. And the FAA does not like to have aprons go straight onto a runway with a taxiway, because people get confused. They go onto a runway when they shouldn't. So in this case, we come into the parallel taxiway and then feed into the runway farther down. We'd have a midfield exit. And that would actually handle a lot of the traffic, because landing aircraft can often turn off by midfield, and departing ones would start from the right side of the drawing and fly to the left most of the time. So that is the second stage of development in blue. The third stage is purple. That's just adding some more apron as needed, as demand dictates, and then extending the parallel taxiway the rest of the way. And then the green is development beyond the planning period. And if demand dictated, there were more corporate use and the need for more corporate hangars and parking and apron, then that would be a suitable layout for that. So that's the concept as to how a new airport would be staged. It is looking at the fact that the same kind of capabilities would be at the new airport as the existing. The new airport would have facilities that meet current FAA standards, and the airport would be set up to be able to develop into an expanded airport, again meeting FAA standards. And also, if FAA were funding this, they would not want you to overdevelop initially. So again, they would want you to justify the full-length parallel taxiway right out of the gate. They'd want you to justify why so much apron and so on. So we feel that we have something that FAA would realize that at least you're being prudent. And in a similar respect, let's face it, the City Council needs to be prudent and develop enough replacement airport to do the job properly, but not so much that the first phase is more than we need to bite. The next slide is one that if anybody can read, they should get a prize. But the purpose of this one was really to show you the detail we went through in cost estimating. And so we have each line item of the cost we would expect for the development. And that is the land acquisition, the fencing, some drainage, all of the paving and lighting, the weather system, even apron flood lighting, the various hangars that we're moving in here, water supply, sanitary system, auto parking, and so on. Those facilities, in our estimate, based on our recent projects throughout California, would indicate to us that the cost of development for that would be in the range of about $6.4 million. If FAA were funding this, if they said, great idea to move the airport, we'd love to help, we'd like to fund our full 90% of the eligible items, then they'd be funding $5.1 million. And the state would be part of that. It's FAA and state is 5.1. The FAA is 90%, the state is 5% of the FAA. And so, in essence, the state is 4.5%, the FAA is 90%, and the city's the rest, 5.5%, in terms of how the grants work. The city shares $1.3 million for the first phase of development. And that includes not only the match of the FAA and the state, but also the items that are non-eligible, and that is the T-hangars, the fuel farm. Now, I say non-eligible because FAA likes to think of them as non-eligible. I've actually had this argument on the national level, and they are eligible. It's just that when you have no other aeronautical needs, then the FAA will fund those. So since you have future aeronautical needs, more taxiway, more apron, they will really never get around to funding those. They consider those revenue projects. State Aeronautics will give you a loan for 20 years at about 4%, and so that is a way of doing them other than just cash flow from the city. So that's the first stage of development. And in the second stage, I mentioned that we're doing more taxiway. The third stage, again, taxiway. And we're also getting into some maintenance projects because the airport's a little bit older by then. The next slide. This one you have a little better chance of reading. And this is showing the total development costs in 2017 dollars. And again, it's $6.4 million for the first stage. The second stage is only $320,000. We spread it out because it just wasn't absolutely required as part of the first stage. And the third stage is $977,000. So the grand total over approximately 20 years is $7.7 million. Of that, the FAA and state would be $6 million, local would be $1.7 million, and that's how we get to the total. So that's
the FAA over 20 years too?
Yeah, this is everybody over the 20 years is the $6 million is FAA and state.
Okay.
So that is what we found. I'm pleased that we have several site candidates. Other sites down there can work as well. This was the one that, based on our past meetings with you, we felt might have merit and should deserve further study. And so we've identified this as the preferred site. We've prepared the cost estimates, and these kinds of things are doable. We can have a conversation about next steps and what FAA's interests might be and how they'd be approached, but this is sort of the formal part of my presentation.
Okay. Well, let's, at this point, I've been asking a few questions. Is there anyone else who has a question right now, council members? We can go on. I know, see, Mark wants to chime in here. So I don't hear anyone at this point, so I'll let Mark speak and then we'll talk some more.
Oh, thank you very much, Mayor. Thanks, Bob. What we're looking for is some council direction on how to proceed forward with this specific site, the Interstate 5 South Airport relocation site. We think it involves 3 basic steps to begin our meetings with FAA to discuss all the options that are available in an effort to relocate the airport from its current site. And that'd be the initial meeting. They haven't been part of this, so we need that. And the second one, we'd like to enter into a contract to provide an updated land appraisal of the current airport site. That's estimated to be a cost of about $5,000. That's so we know what type of residual land value we have that may be able to go into our share of this and what that land is worth. The third item, we'd like to enter into a contract to develop an airport feasibility study, the existing airport feasibility study. It will analyze and evaluate our existing airport, looking at the highest and best use of the existing airport property, and providing recommended steps to the city of Los Banos on how to proceed with that parcel of land based on relocation. This estimated contract amount would be about $11,000. Now, the actual relocation report that Waddell Engineering is preparing is scheduled to be finalized after we meet with FAA and have their input. If these 3 items were approved, the appraisal, the airport feasibility study, and the meetings with the FAA, staff would be bringing back a recommended course of action back to the council for direction after we go through those 3 items. That is the plan that we'd like you to give direction on, if you so deem that that's the way you'd like to go.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I see one light lit right now. Ms. Silvera?
So, the first thing that I think that, if you want direction, and I know that I don't know if I talked to Alex or Sonia about this, is I just can't believe that we didn't think to do an appraisal on our current airport. I know we did one, but we need a current one. I think that absolutely, because when you're talking at a $7.7 million project, and if we can get some state and FAA funding, that number drops down, obviously, our shares to 1.7, but we got to know what we have in value of our current airport. So I think that's absolutely a must, that we need to appraise our current airport to see, because I believe the last one was done in 2006, maybe?
Just a minute, let me, go ahead.
2002, 2003?
Okay, so I think that's right on track, Mark. I think that we need to do that, so that at least we know what we have. Because ultimately, in my mind, if we're going to move it, part of the discussion about moving it is that, at least in my opinion, is that property could do have more beneficial use to the city other than being an airport. And and some of that is public stuff, and some of that is private stuff, is utilizing that to sell to some private development. And we talked about a regional hospital, and so for all those reasons, I think absolutely we must have an appraisal on our current piece of property. My next question, Bob, is for you. What do you think the chances are that we get FAA funding and state funding to move our airport? I mean, this is your line of work. This is what you do for a living. What do you think our chances are of this project becoming a reality? I get it, it's going to take some time, but what do you think?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, having been through this before and watched it around the state. And that is the reason that we put all these projects in the columns they're in is that they are all eligible. And if you had no airport and we went in to meet with FAA about having a new airport, they'd say, we're so glad you have interest in this. We love aviation. We're glad the city wants to be part of it. We'd like to help you. And they would then tell you what they need. They would need a site selection study. They'd need a year of wind. They would then need to go through NEPA environmental, and you'd need to go through CEQA environmental. You'd have your public hearings. And then the FAA would approve an airport layout plan prepared to their requirements, which is then their federal action to approve that airport layout plan. Then they would program your funds through the 5-year capital improvement program process, the first of which would be funding land acquisition at the new site, and then the pieces that I've shown as you step into a new site. And that is the process. I will also say that, having even had a bid opening on June 14th in Bishop, we're running around scratching and begging for transfer of entitlement money, which the city's been very good at helping Bishop in the past when they had expiring money, and trying to get discretionary money from the FAA. And this is all for a $1.5 million apron, and the grant's slowed down now, looking for the rest of the money. So the FAA is not flush with a lot of money for projects like this, which puts a lot of money into a single smaller community. So they're not fond of trying to embark on this. Also, they will have an attitude that your airport's perfectly good. And you do have a good airport. It's just not the appropriate place for it in the long run. It still works now, but in the long run, there should be something different here. So FAA might say to you the same thing they said when we talked about this in 2003 and 4, and that is, oh, if you want a new airport, why don't you just go build it? And therefore expect the city to do that. So none of that's been determined, and since this is eligible, my exercise is to show what's eligible, and then we meet with FAA and tell them how we would like them to help the city of Los Banos and tell them the merits and the rationale. You also have some things in your argument, and that is that the city's done some very wise things. One is they got their wind data, they found some sites that work. The other thing they've done is not spend a lot of money fixing up the old airport on projects that could defer. Mark and I are engineers. We like to see pavements in great shape. So it pains us to see some of the pavements as they age, but also if FAA were to give you a grant on new pavements or even moving to the new site, they will want you to reimburse past grants. And the math on reimbursing the past grants is reimburse what FAA paid on land acquisition, which is actually zero. They've not participated in your land in the past. So therefore, the city owns the land. The next thing they'll want you to participate in is the remaining life of the lighting, the AWAS, and the pavements. Well, we can vouch for the AWAS, not a lot of life left there. The lighting is in reasonable condition, but we did that project probably 15 years ago or more, and that's supposed to last 20 years. So as facilities deteriorate with time, so does the value. So the payback on the lighting is expected to be a small amount if we did the math, and the payback on the pavements is small. You are in need of some pavement work in the next few years, and so if you were to spend $500,000 on that, then that would be fresh pavement with a high value, and if you decide to move then, now you're paying back $900,000 out of $1 million or whatever. So that's how the process works. We would encourage the FAA to participate with you because you have been prudent in not spending money when you are considering a new site, but the negotiations may end that they don't want to help you a lot. Part of that is the prudency of our first stage where we don't build a lot. We build what is necessary and what meets standards. And then FAA, after it's built and replaced, steps in with phase 2 and phase 3. So I can see that a particular hard push is the concept of moving the airport and FAA paying on phase 1, but it's something to ask for and it's all eligible. On the other hand, I know, having been in these projects before, that some of the urban land in the middle of these cities is worth an awful lot. And so there probably is sufficient cash flow to do a lot with creating a new airport and enhancing the other needs of the city. And that's why I think going down the avenue of those studies is a good thing for the city to do. And one thing you said that, gee, it would have been nice if we had an appraisal a little while back. I totally agree with you, but then when I go through this process, I get saddened that we do an appraisal, turn it into FAA, and they say, oh, it's more than 6 months old now, so it's meaningless. And then you go out and start over again. And so actually the city saved some money by not going forward at that time, but this is a good time to go forward to know what are these costs. We have appropriate costs for the project now based on our current bids. And OES, no matter what we say the cost is now, something will make it go up. We know how that works. But this is based on our current bids, and this is what we expected. We had a bid opening for a nice public works project like an airport that the contractor gets to come in and do the whole thing, no interruptions, no problems. And so this is what we think the cost would be.
So if you had to put a percentage on it, 50% chance, 100%, 80%, 10%?
Well, I haven't read the book Art of the Deal, but I would not say for many reasons because we're going to encourage 100% funding by FAA. I can understand that FAA might say, well, let's see, the first phase of this is $5 million, and the city's going to get revenue out of the old site, and we'd like the city to pay that. And when I say $5 million, that's FAA and state, so we'll just consider it's about the same. And the city might say, well, look, we'll pitch in a little bit more. We will pay for the land. The city might say that. Well, there's a good reason for it, too, because then you own the land, and the FAA doesn't. When the FAA pays for it, they own 90% of it. And if that were the case with your current airport, if your airport were worth $10 right now, FAA gets $9 if it's ever sold. Right now, the airport's worth $10, the city gets $10. So that would be a step in the art of the deal to work with FAA. The other would be to say to the city, you know, we've held off on about $1 million of runway projects that Waddell designed 2 years ago now, and we've wanted to move forward, but we're being prudent, and so we'd at least like that amount of money to move on to the new site. So we start putting the marbles together. We would be asking for the whole thing, and we'd expecting a lot of help. And so I do think that you're in perfectly good shape for your future projects after the first phase when you've replaced the airport.
Those are really peanuts in compared to the overall cost, though. I mean, you're talking $6.4 million for stage 1 and 1.3 million for phases 2 and 3. I mean, that's a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, that big one would be the best. Heck, I would make a deal with them today. You pay for 90% of phase 1, and we'll figure out a way to pay for phase 2 and 3 on our own. That would be a great deal. But
so I guess you read the book.
I've not read it. No, I haven't. But I guess for me I think it's time that we do it. It's just, but what are our chances other than us funding it 100% on our own? What are our chances of this project moving forward with the help of FAA? Not necessarily the percentage that they're going to put in, but with help of the FAA.
But also I think that certainly we'll know more when we meet with them. And we had a very short meeting with them in 2003 or 4 with the mayor and the city manager at that time and Joe Souza. And the meeting lasted about 4 minutes. And that was that. They said, if you want a new airport, go do it. Actually, even if they just said that would not be all bad, because that would then allow you to transfer your grant obligations to the new airport. I do think that it can be good for the city to own the land because of what we're saying here. And so it's not all bad if FAA doesn't pay for that. And it's also a good olive branch to the FAA. Hey, look, you know, we'll buy the new land, you know, we'll do our part. Also, I think it's in some respects for FAA, somewhat of a no-brainer that, gee, if you're about to ask for $1 million, $1.5 million on paving, the least they can do is put that to the new site where the pavement has a long life and can be used. So right there, we've cut the $6 million down to $3 million, and then the rest of it is to whatever extent the FAA will help. Now, the FAA does give you $150,000 a year of entitlement money. That's not an awful lot, but it is money. And so you can accumulate 4 years of that. So you'd be spending some of that money and working your way into the new site. That could be spent on design, it could be spent on environmental, some of those early costs. So I think you can whittle away at it.
So in other words, then, the next step is we've got our wind study, we've studied the area, we've done what we need to do. The next step is actually to go sit down with them and see if they're even going to talk to us, or they're going to tell us, well, you want one, go build it, like they did in 2003.
Well, I must admit they were on their way to a golf course at the time. We were shocked when we showed up and they were wearing shorts, and it was a Friday, but we were surprised. But that still would have been the outcome if we even had a 2-hour meeting. This is eligible work. The city has a good rationale as to why they'd like to be at a different site, and the city has a good rationale as to why FAA should help them, even if it's just to the tune of replacing the money they'd give you a grant on right now, putting it into the new site. So I do think that there's some merit there. I think you want to go into any meeting knowing more, not less. And one of the first things they're going to ask you is, well, what's your existing site worth? And it's good to have an appraisal. And it's not that you need to tell them that either. That's your business. But the FAA will want you to fund it all out of that. But they're not recognizing the fact that that land has never been obligated. And we've gone back to airports in the 70s and 80s and asked for reimbursement for land that cities bought in the 1940s. And FAA says, what do you mean? We say it's eligible to reimburse land that's never been reimbursed. And so we've asked for it, and we've received it. Well, our clients have.
Very good. Oh, on your appraisal on the land value, the land acquisition, did you have that appraised?
We haven't done any appraisals, and
on
this would be
the property of the future airport site.
No.
So then how did
this is an assumption in talking with city staff. And so that is something that you'd probably want to also have appraised and get a better idea of what you're looking at.
So the city staff was able to give you those numbers, that $682,490 for land acquisition?
That was their order of magnitude estimate, whatever I put on my table.
Okay.
And I would also say that that's just because we've all been working together cooperatively. We realize that someone qualified to come up with a land value will go do that. And so that's good. And that's something you'll want to know. And let us remember that if there become difficulties in accomplishing the I-5 site specifically, we have reason to believe the other sites are also workable. We don't have the wind specifically on that one, but the wind is pretty much panning out to what we expected. Those other sites are nearby, and you could go to a different one if it came to that.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, I'm going to go back about 10 years,
Okay.
and I will not belabor this issue, but I remember when we were going to, the conventional wisdom was to sell that airport when property was really low, and thank God that wisdom prevailed and we didn't do that.
That was about $4 million then, as I remember.
Yeah, and it maybe, and I'm just so glad. Scott, were you on the council then? No. Well, I'm just so glad we didn't close that airport. I'm so glad we didn't sell the land at that time. We had a site location, but if I remember right, Bob, there were about 10 landowners at one time. Is that correct?
This was the Pioneer site.
Yes.
Out to the west. There were multiple landowners, and that was also for a larger airport than we're even doing now. That was to become sort of a regional business jet airport where aircraft could come from San Francisco and San Jose, and they could sleep here in hangars and drink relatively cheap jet fuel, and the staff could live here because for San Jose Airport, the companies that own jets want their crew available within 45 minutes of travel time. And so Los Banos could have been a candidate where they can live here, park their planes here, and then fly them into San Jose in the morning to pick up the boss and go on the trips. So that was the concept then.
Yeah, and that was before I got on the council, and years before, and I just remember that because there were so many landowners, and then things just fell apart.
And another issue with that would have to be dealt with is you have your landfill out in that area, and you need to have landfills more than 2 miles away from turbine aircraft airports, and that was closer than that. But the landfill might have been managed to the satisfaction of FAA or ultimately closed. So it was one that would need to be dealt with.
And Mark, of all the sites, everything that we talked about, are there any other candidates in your opinion?
I think any of the 4 sites that we looked at, you mean besides these 4 sites?
Yes, any sites that you've looked at so far, and I'm talking about acceptability, wind study, and being able to actually purchase sites.
The other 3 sites, I think there's a total of 4, they probably all would pass, but they haven't had wind studies on them. But they do have, some have prime ag requirements. Fox Hills is very expensive. They have a lot of outstanding liens on that land for grading and stuff, so that'd be very expensive. The Pioneer site that you brought up, actually, now that you have all the cells approved on Billy Wright, that the landfill is not going to close. They've got a lot of that approved. Plus, that's the direction of our city's growth, so that would just create another problem with it. It would just be the only direction we can grow, so that'd be really close to where we were at. So, and I don't know of any other sites. I haven't done any other sites, Mike.
Because my goal is to continue to expand Billy Wright, and we're working on that now, as
Yes,
you know.
yes, we are doing
And
that.
because we need a viable waste area.
Yep.
And
Definitely.
Yeah, so that puts that out. Stacy, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to chime in that originally when we got together with Bob to talk about site selection, we were looking at 6 sites. The 4 that are included in your staff report are really what were eligible and had potential for future relocation. The 2 other sites were the Pioneer site, but we determined early on that Pioneer site would not be beneficial to the city, although it had good potential, as it still does even today, but we had issues about 15 years ago. We didn't want to repeat history, as well as that is, as Mark described, is in our growth patterns, in our urban growth boundary. We looked also at a site on the north side of 152, so on the west end of the general plan, so near I-5, but north side of 152. And that site was eliminated due to the wetlands in the other area and the ecological area. It's environmentally sensitive, and it can't be, there's certain restrictions with migrating birds and things of that nature that we needed to stay away from. So those 4 sites really had the best potential for us to move forward on.
Didn't the county approve a housing development out there too?
They approved a housing, was a guidance package on the west side of I-5 and 152. They did.
Okay, so that would be another problem with
urban growth, urban development. You really want, and in our site selection early on, we really wanted to set the city up where we don't have 30, 40 years down the road where we're up against this again. We're up against urban growth, and we really wanted to put the city in the best position for the future.
Current airport is what, 125?
Yes.
125 acres, and we're looking at more than doubling that.
About 300, but also you don't own all the land that the FAA would like you to own right now at the current airport. And you were past grants that were offered, so not accepted.
Okay, and is there a possibility of farming the land around the new airport if it were located out there? If we leased it out?
Well, FAA has restrictions on how close you can farm some things, but farming is a way of controlling the grass and the weeds and things off to the sides of the runway. You just have to be outside the safety areas.
Okay.
And so, in fact, we've got some clients that make some pretty good money on the farming aspects.
Okay, excellent.
One thing I'll say, too, is the Pioneer site was a good one, but the one thing we never knew about it was the wind. And the city is commended for biting the bullet, writing the check, and installing the wind equipment. Because we can go down this entire path of all these discussions, and then surprise, surprise, we're in design, we collect wind, and it doesn't work. And we know that this site, based on the wind that has been collected, is 97% favorable in that runway orientation. We know that your existing site is tilted more to the west, and that has good wind coverage, not as good as this. So imagine what is it in between, and we don't know. And wind is funny. It comes down through the hills and so on. So we're lucky that you have good wind information now, that you have sites that work, 3 or 4 of them down there, and you have choices.
And what I'm thinking, if there ever were to be some kind of economic development center or industrial park there, that you would need an airport, and the airport would be the first thing. And yeah, I'm glad to see this, because I could never vote to close have this town without some kind of air facility. I just think it's too important. Council members, are there any other questions? Stacy, can you give us the exact verbiage then of what, or Mark, what you'd like approved?
No problem. It's listed on page 2 of the staff report under items 1, 2, and 3. It would begin meetings with the FAA to discuss all the options that are available in an effort to relocate the airport from its current site. That's number 1. Number 2, that the city enter into a contract to provide an updated land appraisal of the current airport site, estimated cost to be about $4,950. And 3, that the city enters into a contract to develop an airport feasibility study to analyze and evaluate the existing Las Banos Airport, looking at its highest and best use of the existing airport property, and provide recommended next steps for the city of Las Banos. And the estimated contract amount for that would be $11,000. And also to state, when these are done, staff will be bringing a recommended course of action back to council for direction.
Okay. Mrs. Lewis, I see your light on. After your question, would you like to make that motion?
I don't have a question. I was going to make a motion based Mr. Fashian's, the 3 items that he just read.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So,
Okay. Let me ask the attorney, based on what Mr. Fashion said, she is approving that motion?
She can make that motion.
She can make that motion, all right?
okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Los Banos Airport Site Selection Concept Study based on items 1, 2, and 3, read by Director Fashion.
Okay, do I have a second? Mrs. Santos.
I second that.
Motioned by Lewis, second by Santos, to approve the 3 items as read by Mr. Fachin. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? None. Carried. Thank you.
One comment, when you do
Yes.
look at your study of the existing land, remember, you certainly have many opportunities, and the whole range of those include even land swaps with the hospital. So you take over their existing land. You have the opportunity of owning the whole of the donut and selling off outside pieces like they did with the United Nations. And you can also just lease the land and have it forever generate income to the city. And just imagine if you sold the old site for $4 million, you would have wished that you leased it instead, and the rent keeps going up. So I think you have a lot of exciting possibilities, and looking forward to the next steps.
Well, the most exciting is we really need a regional hospital here that's centrally located for Gustine, Dos Palos, and Los Banos, and the surrounding rural area. So if that gets us also closer to a hospital, and I'm sure Alex can start with the planning of some kind of RFP or whatever we can do to start with interest in a new regional hospital, that would be wonderful. So.
And if I may add.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, and that lease option that you were speaking of, Madera Fair did that. They had a large plot of land that was not being used. They leased it out, and there's a large, wonderful complex of stores and shopping that's built on that, and they're going to acquire good money for a long period of time as a result of that lease contract.
Well, nice to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay, let's go on to item 11, cancellation of regular city council meeting schedule for Wednesday, August 16th, 2017, due to summer break. Okay, we need an action motion, so do I have a motion? Mrs. Santos, I see your, are you in? Okay.
Motion, so I can definitely try.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion for the cancellation of the regular city council meeting scheduled for Wednesday, August 16, 2017, due to summer break.
Okay, Mrs. Lewis? Okay, motion by Santos, second by Lewis, to cancel the August 16th meeting, 2017. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? No. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next meeting. Our next item, and it's advisement of public notices, and there's no report. Let's go on to item 13, city manager's report. Alex?
Nothing today, Mayor.
Okay. Let's go on to city council member reports, and tonight we'll start with Mrs. Santos.
I'd first like to apologize for my horrible lateness today. I unfortunately have not been able to work out my schedules with my 2 jobs, but I do plan to hopefully make better time as of the next few meetings. And also, I want to, I'm sure we've had some mentioning, but of our injured officers, my heart goes out to their families, and it was quite horrible to hear, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On July the 22nd, I had the honor of attending the Eagle Court of Honor for Parker Wilson, Patrick Allen, and Jerry Lara from Troop 58 here in Los Banos. And over the past, 3-4 years, I've attended the Eagle Scouts honoring. And it's really a joyous occasion to see these young men achieve the level of scouting that they do. It's the highest level that you can achieve in Boy Scouts. And so I tip my hat to these young men for sticking it out and getting through these badges and doing things that maybe they didn't want to do or seemed impossible, but then able to achieve those levels and move on. So congratulations to those 3 young men. On July the 25th was the LULAC conference at Pacheco High School, which I had an opportunity to attend, and they had some guest speakers there to encourage the young people who attended this conference, and it was good to be there. July the 26th, last week, I went to Fresno to Chukchansi Park and attended a ceremony for the United Soccer League, the ULS, awarding of a professional franchise in Fresno. So other than the earthquakes, now we've got another professional franchise coming to Fresno. And so that was an exciting ordeal to be at. There were some local families that I knew that are some investors in this team, and so I think Fresno is really excited about bringing on this new franchise. August 16th, we're going to have a second Measure V workshop at the Community Center from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we'd like to encourage the community to please come out and attend this workshop so you can see where the Measure V money is going, how it's going to be used, and participate, ask any questions that you may have of the Measure V committee, the Measure V staffing and MCAG. So that's a really important workshop. I'd encourage all community members who are interested in that 0.5% sales tax that you pass this November to attend that workshop. And I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to our officers for the outstanding job that they do. The 2 officers who were injured in the recent incident shooting that happened this week, as well as all of our officers. But I have been praying for them, and I pray for their speedy recovery, that their health will be restored, and that they will be able to return to their jobs. I also would like to send out my condolences to the family, especially to the children who lost their father. But with that, I want to say to the community, if an officer asks you to do something, if they ask you to step outside, if they ask you to, whatever they ask you to do, just comply. And if you feel that your rights are being violated, then you can take that up with your attorney. But to save your life, you would be wise to comply and ask what an officer asks you to do. You know, that's part of their job, is to make sure that you're safe and to make sure that they're safe and to make sure that our community is safe. So please, just comply when they ask you to do something. It's not that they're being mean to you, it's for the safety of everybody involved. And lastly, for me, I want to thank the Los Banos Police Department because I was attacked by a pit bull this weekend. And fortunately, it wasn't anything serious. I got scratched up pretty badly by the dog. He was trying to attack one of my dogs that I had in my arms. And Sergeant Reyes and another deputy came out with him, and I want to thank Sergeant Reyes for taking control of the situation and for the dispatchers who comforted me while I was being attacked. And also, one of my community members in my district happened to drive by and stopped and allowed me to get in his truck for safety until the officers arrived. It was a very scary situation, and I feel very fortunate that I wasn't mauled, but I did get scratched up. So another thing to the community, please make sure that your animals are locked up appropriately in your yards. make sure that your animals have been licensed, make sure that your animals have had their shots, and I'd like to encourage people to make sure that you get your animals spayed and neutered. And that's all the report that I have this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Sawyer.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I do, my thoughts and my prayers go out to our injured officers and their families. I can't even imagine the struggle that they're going through right now, and I do want to thank the rest of our first responders, because I know that they're one big family, Chief, and I know that it's with the help of their extended family that they're able to somewhat get through this tragic time that they're going through. And the next thing that I have is there's going to be a Back the Blue motorcycle ride Saturday, August 19th. All funds go to the families of the 2 Los Banos officers that were injured in the July 31st shooting. You can contact Geneva Bretz at 209-587-0573. Again, that is Saturday, August 19th, a motorcycle run to support our 2 injured officers and their families. And the donation on that is $25, and that includes your ride and tri-tip dinner, or just dinner if you don't want to ride. And I want to thank the folks that are putting that together, Jesse Rodriguez, and then also American Armory in Hollister. This is it was a spur of the moment deal that they put together, and so I want to thank them for their continued support, especially Jesse, who doesn't work in Los Banos anymore, but still is a big part of our community. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. I also attended the Eagle Scout presentation. It was, these are not Boy Scouts. They're men Scouts. These guys had whiskers. And I was just thoroughly impressed that they're going to college, they're finishing high school, they're just real leaders of our community, and I can't think of a better way to show off the talents of these young men is through scouting. So thank you for the invitation. We started the first step for a bike path for Merced College. So we're working on that. MCAG is going to be doing the analysis. It was approved overwhelmingly. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to find out, and that'd be a perfect project for Measure V regional funds, and because it involves more than one jurisdiction, actually a bunch of them. And if we can get a bike path out to Merced College, it would be absolutely wonderful to cross the bridge. So if people want to walk out there, bike out there, skateboard out there, we'll have a safe path for them. So I'm hoping this works out, but we've started the first phase of this. The Italian celebration went very well again. A lot of free food, a lot of good food, and people just ate till their heart's content. And I tell you, the plates were so large, they were just heavy. You had to have 2 hands to carry all the food. And thank you, Mr. Silvera, for the auctioneering. The Measure V workshop, as Mrs. Lewis mentioned, very important that you attend that. Very, very important that you attend it. It's the planning for the next 30 years of road projects. And so this over here on the west side, the first meeting that MCAG held, it wasn't well attended because the publicity wasn't that good. This one, we're hoping to get the publicity out and make sure that it is better. So they've rescheduled a meeting. And so thank you, MCAG, for doing that. A lot of people have asked about donations for the officers. We need to coordinate through one person so nothing is wasted, and your gift of either food, donations, gas cards, whatever, it can be appreciated and used and go directly to the 2 officers. So I would ask you to please contact PD at 827-7070, and you can press 0 and ask for Brenda Geary. Brenda is the coordinator for these 2 officers to make sure that everything that's coming to them in the way of donations, everything is channeled through her, so she can tell you exactly what you need, so your gift, is going to be used, it's going to be appreciated, and it's very well organized over at the PD. So please contact Brenda Geary. That's 827-7070. Dial 0 and ask for Brenda Geary, and that's the way to make those donations. So again, our heartfelt thanks to the officers for their service, and more importantly, the brother and sisterhood of the emergency responders, police and fire, for what you do for this community. So with that, we're now going to go into closed session. Public Employee Annual Performance Evaluation pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, title City Manager. If there's anything to report, we will do so when we return. Thank you for attending and watching.